Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts digital event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the program, and we will only be accepting questions and comments via the chat window. At the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device, you should be able to see an option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Thank you, and enjoy the event. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome this morning to our Creative Process event. My name is Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU. And this morning we have an amazing conversation with poet and performer Phyllis Capello. And this is moderated by Edvige, Dr. Edvige Giunta and Meili Ellis-Tingle. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our presenters this morning. Phyllis Capello is the author of Packed Small, Plays Big, a collection of poems published in 2018. She is a New York Foundation for the Arts Fiction Fellow and a winner of an Allen Ginsberg Poetry Award. Her work appears in The Dream Book, From the Margin, The Milk of Almonds, The Voices We Carry, Embroidered Stories, and other anthologies. She works as a musician and clown, entertaining children, families, and older adults in hospitals with Healthy Humor, Inc. Phyllis also teaches poetry to students in schools and libraries all over New York City with the Community Word Project. And Phyllis is a member of the Ferlinghetti Girls Poetry Group. Dr. Edvige Giunta is the author of Writing with an Accent, Contemporary Italian-American Women Authors, and co-editor of 5 anthologies, including The Milk of Almonds and Embroidered Stories. At New Jersey City University, she is professor of English, and she has trained scores of students in the art of memoir and created the first course devoted to the Triangle Factory Fire. Her literary, nonfiction, and poetry appear in many journals and anthologies. Edvige has been profiled in the New York Times and the Italian television RAI for her work in memoir and Italian American studies. Her book, Talking to the Girls, Intimate and Political Essays on the Triangle Fire, co-edited with Mary Ann Trasciatti, will be published in 2022 by New Village Press. Meili Ellis-Tingle is a senior at NJCU, where she majors in English with a concentration in creative writing. She is from Hilo, Hawaii, and she has been living in Jersey City for the last 3 years with her husband and their 2 cats. She recently started writing poetry, and she will study memoir this spring. So we're in great hands this morning. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Eddie, to start us off.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for all the wonderful collaborative work that we do with the NJCU Center for the Arts that makes it possible to bring these events to our community near and far. So it's March 30th. We are approaching the end of Women's History Month, and we've had some truly wonderful events. Last week, a very moving event with students and graduates from New Jersey City University, and also a student from Vassar College who shared their experience of being inspired in their creative work, in their research, and in their activism by the Triangle Fire. So today I'm especially pleased to have with us Phyllis Capello, and it's no accident the title of this event is Factory Girls, because it expands on the conversation on the Triangle Fire that we had last week, but also with Annie Lancelotto a couple of weeks ago. And also it seems especially meaningful that Phyllis helps us leave Women's History Month and enter Poetry Month, National Poetry Month in April. So today we have a special treat. We get to enjoy some poetry in anticipation of the upcoming National Poetry Month. Welcome, Phyllis, and thank you so much for being with us today to share some poetry and to be in conversation about the work, a lot of the work that's behind the scene, so that our audience, and for me especially meaningful, the writers in my classes who are busy at work, getting ready to write final memoirs or assembling a chapbooks, will draw, I am sure, inspiration from your words. And I think the best way to get started is with some poetry. So Phyllis, will you read us a poem?
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for inviting me here. I certainly will. The name of this poem is Embroidery. This line is a red silk thread, and it is stitching a rose on this page, which is white linen. This line is cornflower blue, and it is making French knots in the flower patch. This is yellow for a daisy, a satin stitch, white for the petals, one by one. Wait, I'm not done. Green for the stem stitches, oriental in their graceful sway. My pen is the scissor that snips the threads. My hand, the box where I keep them. My rhyme is the pattern I follow and work. The ink is the needle that pierces the page. Feel the fabric of my poem. Here and there, a word sticks out like a French knot in the middle of the stamen.
Thank you so much for the beautiful reading. One of the things I've always appreciated about your work is how it really pulls together different threads, to use an appropriate term. You are a poet, you are a fiction writer. Actually, you know, I first encountered your work in the wonderful anthology edited by our friend and colleague Marie-Jo Bona. The voices we carry. You are a storyteller, you're a singer, you work as a clown with children, you are a performer. There are so many facets to your work, and also you embroider. So it's wonderful to actually see these images. Could you tell us a little bit about the images that we just saw, and then maybe we'll talk more about the poem?
Oh, certainly, I'd be happy to. The particular images that you saw were my replication of a photograph of embroidery from your book, Eddie, from Embroidered Stories. And I was at a beautiful reading, and I saw a giant depiction of Joseph, help me with his last name, yes. And I was sitting next to my dear friend who was going to get married in a couple of months, and I didn't know what I could do for her wedding. And I looked up at the screen and I said, I will replicate some of this embroidery on pillowcases for my friends. And so I made 2 pillowcases, and I from the book, I traced the pictures of the book from my computer screen onto the fabric, and I wrote Siate Felice, which means may you be happy. These are original Sicilian embroideries. And the little bird in the middle, I don't know what the bird is, but I was happy to recreate it. There it is. Yeah, it was great fun for me. And I was so glad because it was the answer to my question, what can I give these 2 beautiful women who are getting married?
Well, that is such a beautiful gift, as is your poem, and there is this wonderful doubling or mirroring of the poem, which is also about another kind of creative work, embroidery and needlework. In the anthology that I edited with Joseph Shorra, the focus was on domestic needlework, which is a skill that Italian immigrant women carried with them when they came to the United States. Embroidery is such an old tradition, particularly in southern Italian culture. I have my linen chest with embroidery that goes back to my great-grandmother and grandmother. So domestic needlework is something private and intimate and beautiful, and as complicated as it can be in the experience of a woman, because also it codifies a certain way of thinking of women's role within the domestic space. It's dramatically different from needlework and the factory. And it's so interesting to me that in in your work you really kind of navigate both of these aspects of needlework, the needlework, domestic needlework, and industrial needlework. And you are of course very much involved with the Triangle Fire community. Could you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the Triangle Fire, when you first learned about the 1911 fire that killed 146 workers and then became the catalyst for so many major political, social, and legal changes?
Yes, in my house, we lived with my grandmother and my grandfather, and we were not spoken to in Italian at all. But when my grandmother got together to have her coffee with her sisters and sisters-in-law, there was a word that repeated a lot, and the word was fuoco, fuoco. And they talked about this word with such passion, and I had no idea what it was until I went to junior high school and studied a little Italian. And then many years later, when I learned about the Triangle Factory, I realized that they were speaking about their memory of the fire, because my grandmother lived on Bleecker Street around the corner. It was her parish, the Lady of Pompeii, on Carmine Street, and she was 17 years old when that happened. So that was very much a part of her life, but she didn't share it with me or with any of us. And I had to intuit it as a detective afterwards, like, oh, this story of this fire has been part of my family for such a long time, but I just didn't know it until I was able to figure it out. And then many years later, I figured, oh, that's what they were talking about. And that's why they were so intense. And then I came to know about the fire through reading, and was so glad to meet others who were inspired to remember this important event. And you kind of know where that comes from, where that goes. And to meet like-minded spirits and to meet storytellers and historians. I remember the beautiful, beautiful lectures at Casa Italiana, and the inspiration of the kites, and which still fills me with such imagination that we made those kites with those women's names on them, where when we carry them, as I did the very first time I carried them, someone came and said, I come from the town where this woman came from in Sicily. And it was just, wow, that meeting, just because we had an object and a woman's name, I was able to meet someone who knew of this woman's town. And it was so meaningful to me.
Absolutely. Thank you for going back and telling us that first memory. Such a powerful story, and of course we owe it to our community, also to the creativity of people like Annie Lanzilotto, who was with us a couple of weeks ago, to have these tangible objects. And the next year we will have the dedication of the Triangle Fire Memorial, thanks to the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. But also in 2001, you were one of the people with me and others who was involved in the public, the first Italian-American public commemoration of the Triangle Fire, because there had really not been any public Italian-American claiming of this event. And that seems, in light of the story that you're telling about these almost these quiet, secret stories, half understood that you heard as a child, it seems so poignant. And so there is this very interesting juxtaposition between silence and secrecy and not understanding the language, and then the work that you do as a poet, a kind of detective indeed. And so you are given voice to the stories, not just in poetry, but also in song. Now I know you have a very special song about the Triangle Fire that we hope you will sing for us.
I'd be glad to sing it to you. This comes from my folk music history. Did you see them go by here? It was early this morning. They passed by these buildings on their way to the job. Some were white, some were slender, and their dark eyes so tender. At the Triangle Factory, they worked very hard. Living on hope by the pieces they paid them, as they bent to their labor from morning to night. When the fire broke out, there was no way to save them. They rushed to the exit, but the door was locked tight. What could they do in the smoke and confusion? Prayers went unanswered and the flames leapt up high. They stepped to the sills, hand in hand they descended, spent their last seconds as friends in the sky. We're here to give praise to those women and children. By their labor and promise, each one did her part, that her sisters be saved by the laws of tomorrow. May they rise up like sparrows and live on in our hearts.
That is such a beautiful, powerful, and moving poem. And my students from my Triangle Fire course are here with us today, and I'm sure they truly appreciate the work that you're doing, which is this extraordinary combination of evocation, but also really research. I mean, there is all this historical material that you turn into poetry. So I have a two-part question. So the first is, what kind of research or gathering together of material did you do to write this song? And the second is, what is the difference between a song, writing a song, and writing a poem? Just recently, I interviewed the Sicilian singer Francesca Incudine, who has written a song about the Triangle Fire, No Name, a song and a poem as well. But there is something different happens when we hear those words in music. So I would love to hear you say something about that. So tell us about the process of researching for this song, and then the difference between writing a poem and writing a song. How do you make that decision?
This is where I live, Eddie. It's such a beautiful question because I love doing the research. It's so important to do the research and to know, and as you do so clearly explain to people over and over again, this is what happened. But all of the things that happen around what happened are so fascinating and so various. And when I read and read and read and read, and I make pictures in my mind, and somehow something comes out, an image comes out that I want to retain the immediacy of the one person having this experience, one person looking at this experience. Did you see them walk by here? This place, this landscape, this environment, they were human beings who walked by here. Did you see them? Do we still see them? And so I sort of, for me, there's no other way to do it, but always. So I have to be a singer as well as a poet. It just doesn't make, my ideas can't go in one direction. They have to go in different directions. And I wrote this poem. It didn't take too long to write this poem because I was so steeped in the research that I was doing. And then all of a sudden I said, wait a minute, I could try this out and look from far away and from close. I would like my readers or my listeners to see things close and far away at the same time. And image by image, which is what poetry gives us.
That is such a wonderful answer. It's one answer into, and you really address both points. And Francesca too interestingly said that she gets images. So I'm wondering if it's, I mean, the poetry and the singing that coalesce around the image. I would love to put the two of you in conversation. Maybe we need to have a triangle singers event next time. But one of the things I find really striking about what you said is also this use of, and in the poem, this use of the second person, this interpellation, which puts both the poet, but also the listener, and, or, I mean, I'm saying poet, of course, we're talking about the song, but you are a singer and a poet. The audience, it cannot stay outside, really needs to be absolutely involved. So in this sense, your poetry, your songs are also an act of witness. No one can just look from the outside without recognizing that we have a role as witnesses. And you've done that not only with the Triangle Fire, which is very much in the world in which you live, a part of its landscape, but you've also traveled far, as far as Thailand, in your magnificent poem, Factory Girls. And before we say anything about that poem, I just would love to ask you to read it, and then maybe you can tell us the story of the poem, how the poem came to be, and for our audience that may be unfamiliar with the background, tell us a little bit more about the history behind it.
Of course. Thank you for asking. Factory Girls, Bangkok. In the morning, country girls on their way to city jobs ride the rickety bus over steep green hills. All the way to the factory, they chatter like a tree full of birds. Soon their quick brown fingers, their bright, sharp eyes will feed cheap fabric to furious needles. Dart by dart, seam by seam, piles of dresses and sleeves will rise up beside their clattering sewing machines. They'll work as if bewitched till dark. Yesterday, the dawn rising over the far mountains was mirrored in the still lake, but today there is deep fog. The bus, gears grinding, winds its way down slick roads. The air is wet and dense against the windshield. Girls at a nearer stop huddle in the mist, wave dim flashlights, bored like a family of ghosts. Each one carries a small packet of lunch, a tube of lipstick, a plastic comb to smooth down her sleek black hair. A homely girl, voice rising happily, reads aloud from a movie magazine. Every now and then she stands and holds the glossy photos high above her head. This afternoon, when the explosion rises, an enormous roar over the drone of the machines, and the windows splinter, millions of needles sailing off into the air like glass bullets. When the raging fire obscures every exit save one, hundreds of girls will go running and screaming through the terrible heat, the stinging black smoke. Tomorrow they'll find the youngest ones, dead by the dozens. Tiny wrists, small, clever fingertips crushed, trampled by her rushing sisters, till they have no breath to rise and move, like the half-grown flowers they are, toward the light.
The poem takes my breath away every time. It's so vivid how you bring us to that scene in the Bangkok countryside. Can you tell us the story of the poem?
The story of the poem. I wish I could be 100% accurate about the story of the poem. I know it from my point of view. I was, as you know, I'm a teaching poet. And one day, it was 11 degrees out. I went to drive my car to Coney Island to teach, I think, third graders. I opened the car door, and the car door would not shut because it froze open. And I said, okay, I'm on a hill. I'll go down to my gas station because it's down the hill, and they'll fix the door so I can drive to Coney Island. And when I got to the gas station, I pulled in, and the guys opened the other door, and the other door froze open. So I had 2 doors frozen open, and I had to drive 8 miles to Coney Island to teach my 3rd grade class. I took off my belt, and I belted the doors together, and I drove down Ocean Parkway on very bare tires on a sheet of ice all the way. And just as I was arriving at this school, just as I was turning into the parking lot, I remembered that one of the teachers had been shot in the driveway of the school from someone in the project above where the school was. And I was making the turn, and on the radio, I remembered at the same time as I made the turn that this teacher had been shot in the arm. I made the turn, and on the radio came a news bulletin about a factory fire. And I was so afraid of being hurt, I couldn't really hear all the details. And I remember cowering down and looking up at the project. And I went to school that day, and I taught. And when I got home, this was before the internet. When I got home, I looked at all the newspapers and listened to all the news reports, and I could not find any more information about this event, this terrible tragedy. Of course, it reminded me of the triangle. And I did not know how to encapsulate this experience that I'd had with knowing that there was another disaster so much like the triangle. And what I happened to do is, because I'm a musician, I thought, I'll improvise. I don't know all the details. I don't know all the facts, but I understand that something like this has happened, and I will try to invent it as a storyteller would invent it, a day in the life of these humans. So in a way, I had the same format as the song, but a long time before the song. And that's what I did. I improvised, and I advise your students to do the same thing. You don't have to know all the details. I don't even think I'm accurate in the title. And I know I was probably talking about a different fire, a different explosion, a different disaster. But I wrote the poem from the perspective of being one of the girls. And that's how that poem got to be born.
Thank you. Spoken like a true poet. And I think, as writers, as poets, as students, and we're always students for the rest of our lives. Of course, we have responsibilities to research, but I think there is something to be said about not waiting until, or if you know everything, before being able to speak, to pay tribute, to acknowledge, and to embrace. This is something very pertinent, what you said to me, to my work as teachers, because my students are learning about the Triangle Fire, most of them now. And of course, we do our work, our research, and they're doing phenomenal projects. But I don't want them to wait until they become experts to be able to do the work. And so your words are very encouraging. But there is also something very that makes me think of how the memory of certain historical events travels and then becomes a part of public memory. And in Italy, for example, the story of the Triangle Fire has existed, has been present for a long time, and is the subject of a song. Here we go, another song by the Movimento Femminista Romano, 8 Marzo, March 8th, where there is a reference to a factory. And in Italy, for decades, people believed that the Triangle Fire occurred on not on March 25th, but on March 8th, and it was a reason why we have International Women's Day. It's part of a longer conversation, but I think the very poignant idea that you articulated for us is that there is history and there is poetry, which is a kind of myth making, and myth making not as a falsification, but as a way to find, for people to find a language that allows to express emotion and connection. And since we're talking about myth, you know where I'm going. You and I share a deep, deep passion for the story of Persephone and Demeter. And mother, daughter mythology, of course. This is their month. It's spring, and tell us about these two goddesses. Maybe you read us a poem. Maybe you'll tell us the story of how you became interested in these two goddesses.
Oh, Eddie, what a beautiful question. I was 8 years old the first time I wrote a poem about Demeter and Persephone. I was in 3rd grade. I remember so clearly writing this poem, thinking, well, I have to respond to this because this girl has to go through this dangerous thing that she didn't ask to have this happen to her. And so for the rest of my life, I was thinking about hell, but not hell as a Catholic or a religious place, but hell as a physical place where one could emerge from. And I think you want me to read my poem, How Women Get to Hell, right?
Oh, I would love that. You know, that's one of my favorite poems.
How Women Get to Hell. With some it is circumstantial. Familiar terrain reconfigures. One misstep and lives disassemble. Illness manifests, husbands vanish, children spin wildly off into darkness. The certainty of loss is bitter on their tongues as they descend. Others march there, fancied up, lusty enough to kiss the devil. The gate swings open, destiny turns the key. Some marry the devil, spend lifetimes exchanging immense effort for small affection, terrified silence for perilous calm. They enter meekly, bereft of thought, empty of notions. But the young ones, because they are blind or blithe or beautiful, seem to find the path no matter which way they turn. That slippery, golden path, which takes them, smiling and unsuspecting, to the brink, where they stand, pretty toes pointing down, ready for the push.
The certainty of loss is indeed bitter. Such powerful words, and they resonate in so many ways. And what you have done in your rewriting of mythology and history, you have really shown how deeply embedded it is in our hearts, in our consciousness, and how through your poetry you really give us a place where to go and feel that connection. Thank you so much. Your mythical poems are really revolutionary and rebellious, like all the women and the girls. And I want to invite, first of all, our audience and my students who are part of our audience to please post your questions now on chat. In a couple of minutes, we're going to open it up to questions. But I was wondering if you could sing us Bread and Roses. It seems that that's a necessary song today.
I think so. And I've been lost in its lyrics for a few weeks now. And am I right? You want me to sing it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get a note. I sing it in the proper key. As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 millat gray are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing bread and roses, bread and roses. As we go marching, marching, we battle too for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient call for bread, small art or love or beauty, their drudging spirits knew. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. For the rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler, 10 who toil while one reposes, but the sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
Wonderful, truly, truly wonderful. This is going to carry me through today and more. I think I could keep asking you questions, and I love all the stories and the ideas that you're sharing with us, but I can be too selfish. So I'm going to ask Meili, who is co-hosting the event with me now, to take over and to ask us some questions from our audience. And I know that Meili has also some questions herself. Thank you, Phyllis. Meili.
Hello. So the first question we have is from Mike Ferrito. He says, I love the melodic structure of your songs. Where did you get that inspiration from?
A beautiful question. I don't know. Things just occur to me. I think that the more you sing and the more familiar you are with different kinds of music, the more they become part of who you are, and they just, inspiration means to take in. So what you take in, you can also give back, I think. So Mike, that's the closest I can get to an answer to that. Lovely question.
Thank you. And from Peggy Jackson, we have, how do your many artistic interests support or inspire your poetry and short stories?
Another beautiful question. Yeah, I live in such a, as you can tell, I live in such a varied work life. And I really love all my jobs. They're all so interesting. They're all, it's a privilege to do all of them. And my inspiration comes from looking around and where am I? Environment, landscape is very important to me, because I think my city itself is always a character, often a character in my poetry and in my songs. And yeah, that's where that comes from.
Thank you. And from Anifa Williams, she asks about Bread and Roses. Out of curiosity, what does roses represent to you in this song?
Wow, beautiful questions. These can all be poems, you know. I guess the beautiful parts of life that are sometimes exacted from people because of work. And I like that it's on par. It's bread and roses, so they're equal. They're equal, and they balance each other, because without the beauty and without the compassion that you can have for others and for yourself, you know, you can exist, but you're not living. So I think that's what the roses mean, and beauty.
Thank you. So for my own question, could I please get the photo of the painting posted? And my question is, because this is the cover of your collection of poetry, correct?
It is, yes.
My question, mostly because in our Flash class, we are putting together a chapbook. I'm wondering, what is your process for putting together a poetry collection? How are your poems united? Is it like thematically? How do you select them? And how do you choose your order?
That's a very good question. I'm not quite sure I can answer that in a cohesive way. Um, I could say that unbeknownst to me, I write about the same things all the time. And my wonderful editors have always said, well, you know, you have this poem about that too. And I'm like, I do. So I really, really need them. And I really, really appreciate them because they tell me, you know, Phyllis, these are your themes. And so putting together the manuscript, I think Eddie mentioned this last week. Mentioned how my whole manuscript starts with an epigraph. Is that how you say it? One does not choose one subject matter, one submits to it. It's Flaubert. So yes, so my subject matter, which comes to me from the life, from who I am and the life that I lead, and that's what ordered the poetry in my book. And some of it is a little haphazard, I have to say. People like Paola Corso have a beautiful, beautiful way of ordering things. I'm not as good as she is at that. And just, what can I say? That's the best I can do.
Thank you. No, that's very nice, very enlightening. Um, I have another question from the audience. Annie Lenzilato, sorry. She asks, uh, in your work as a clown in hospitals, can you talk about humor, song, in your healing work?
Well, sure. I've always been a musician since I'm a little girl, and it never occurred to me that everyone else wasn't either. And when I realized that I could entertain people with music, I got this very lucky job of working in hospitals with children, and so the music is kind of an entryway into it's the landscape again, the landscape of any room that I'm in. I could look at look and say, well, what could serve this landscape? What kind of melody do I am I inviting people to dance? Am I inviting people to sing with me? Am I inviting a child to experience a little bit of wonder or a little bit of familiarity in an unfamiliar place like a hospital? So finding, picking, it's like my husband said my brain is like a computer because I go, oh, I can have this, I have that. I think I have this in that file. And then it comes out as music, and it's a lot of fun too. Hope that answers your question, Annie.
Thank you. So I have another question. I believe we touched on this a little bit, but I'm just going to ask it to see if you can elaborate any more. When you're writing, do you know that you're writing a song or a poem first? Do you set out to write a song or a poem, or do you just see where it goes? Because you are both a singer and a poet, or are some of your poems both?
Um, I experience some as music, in cadence and rhythm and sound, how sound connects to sound. But I don't set out to write a poem or to write a piece of music. And I'm not much of a songwriter, I have to say. I've gotten lucky a few times, I would say that. But and things just haunt me, and I have to meet them with art, whatever that art is. Maybe it's learning a song, sometimes it's writing a song, but I have to find a way to respond to what is haunting me. Is the moment haunting me? Is the story haunting me? Is the plot or the theme, or just sometimes just words? How words haphazardly come together, and you say, "Wait a minute, is that a title? Is that the end of a poem? Is that the kernel of a poem?" It always surprises me, which is the interesting part for me. I like to be surprised by where things go.
Thank you so much. Gabriella Belfiglio asks, um, how were you exposed to Greek myths as a child?
Gabriella, a beautiful question. Edith Hamilton was my very first exposure to Greek myths, and I gobbled them up. I just gobbled them up, and they have always fascinated me. They still fascinate me. I probably think about them every single day. So they became such a part of the fabric of my fascination with what goes on in the world. Because as I say about the Greeks, they didn't leave anything out. Every little factor of humanity is in a Greek myth, if you're paying attention. So that's how it started, though.
Thank you. And we have one last question before we go back to Edie. Rosaria Caparimo asks, do you find you write in spurts when you are haunted, or do you write in a consistent pattern? Do you have like a writing practice?
I think both. I am consistent, and I do write in spurts. When I wrote Factory Girls, I worked on that poem for at least 6 months, and it took me 6 months just to write the first line. And I was determined that I was going to get that first line right. And when I got it, it's not very complicated, but when I got it, I was like, oh, it really was worth showing up here all the time and writing it and rewriting. I mean, I have like a pile like that high, which, so that taught me something, that if you, and of course it's always difficult to be simple. So yes, both of those things. I do write in spurts, but I do write determinedly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now back to you, Edie.
Thank you so much, Meili. And I just want to acknowledge my wonderful current students like Meili, like Peggy Jackson, who is also with us today. And they are both members of the English Department Student Events and Publications Committee, and also former students, graduates who continue to work with me to organize literary events and to expand the conversation that happens in the classroom. And you're just so wonderful. So I need to say that. Thank you, Meili. Great job. And since a lot of the work that brings events such as this is a spirit of community, a love for community, as we bring to the close of these events, Phyllis, I wanna ask you about two communities. Okay, one is the community of the dead. Okay, who are you? You talked about writing, finding out what is that's haunting you, so you can write the story. Okay, so who are the people and the writers who are no longer with us? I mean, we know about, of course, about the Triangle Girls and the girls from the Kader toy factory and the mythical figures, but writers and perhaps family members, and then your current community. Maybe you can tell us a little bit also about this collaboration with your fellow writers, Gabriele Berfiglio and Paola Corso, and how you call yourselves the Ferlinghetti Girls.
Yes. Such a beautiful new part of my colleague creativity these days. So yeah, well, so many writers. I mean, so many writers and writers of music as well, and interpreters of story like Gioia Timpanelli. She's still with us, and she tells stories from that my Sicilian father told me when I was 4 years old. And I still learn and grow from that kind of story, because her stories are placed in a kind of universal humanity. And as a singer, that's another place for me to explore all the time. So yes, the haunting of what's gone on before, and what I wish, how I wish to make community out of people who are maybe not aware that they have the same needs and the same uh, intensity inside them. And I think that that's art's job, really, to say, yes, look, turn around. These are your people who are having this experience, and they would like to be entertained, but they would also like to be documented. They want to know that they're a part of something. And the poet, I think that's the poet's job to do that. So there's so many people from the past, and I'm not good at making lists. So that's what I can tell you.
Okay, well, fair enough. So you want to tell us a little bit about your collaboration with your current fellow writers, Gabriella and Paola?
My girl, my beautiful, beautiful companions. To do that, I think I would like to read you a short poem.
Sure.
Written after our first meeting. Now this was a COVID beginning to our meeting because we had to meet outdoors, and we still meet outdoors, as a matter of fact. So the Ferlinghetti girls met this time, the first time, at Greenwood Cemetery, and I wrote this poem for that meeting. 3-Hawk meeting. We stroll Greenwood Cemetery, home of the receiver of many, then settle near a small lake masked at the required distance. We cannot touch, but the roots beneath us entwine and converse about daffodils, Johnny jump-ups, feathery leaves like we do. The Ferlinghetti girls, 3 poets from Brooklyn, at our first meeting, reading poems from our cell phones, texting each other the stanzas first because breezes carry voices off, poet's dilemma, even before they're received. I'm lying down, so spot the hawks first. Look, we tally them, 2 in the foreground above the lake, 1 so high it's a tiny scrimshaw scratch against the blue. 1 hawk for each of us, Paola says. Picture us, poet friends, floating, silent, talons tucked, our white-tipped wings spread wide, guide each descending arc. Black eyes keen on the land below. Or are we instead 3 tiny mice awaiting the rush of fate? Quick, spread strong wings over your nests, poets. Send into today's dark winds words that speak of every being's worth. Petal, citizen, infant, leaf, root, mouse, and mark. With stone cutters press this plea, that nestlings get their share of years to float without terror in dreamy spirals over this garden of spring and death.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you for reading that. Now, for both for those of us who are familiar with the great Lawrence Ferlinghetti, but also there may be some, especially the younger generation, who may not be familiar with the great poet. Why Ferlinghetti? Why did you choose to call yourselves the Ferlinghetti girls?
I named us. As a lark, I named us because we were lined up one day at an art exhibit, and I said, "Oh, look at us! We're the 3 poet girls, or we're the Ferlinghetti girls." I was introduced to Ferlinghetti as a girl growing up in Brighton Beach who had no money to buy books, so I would go to the used bookstore on Brighton Beach Avenue, and I would go in the back and I would open up Ferlinghetti's book, Coney Island of the Mind, and I would read it at the bookstore. I didn't own a copy for such a long time because we didn't have any money, but I would go to this bookstore and open it up and read it. So his images and what he wrote about were so important to me, and that I should come this full cycle into my old age where Mr. Ferlinghetti happily lasted such a long time for us. And my friends were equally as excited about the idea of being part of this tradition that he created. And Coney Island is in Brooklyn, and that's where I'm from.
It all makes a perfect sense, and we certainly wish you and Gabriella and Paula our best on your on this poetic venture. We are coming close to the end, and there are pieces of our work that we like to read because perhaps our audience is familiar with them and loves them, and then there are sometimes pieces of our work, whether poetry or prose, that we love to read because they do something for us. They come from a special place in our heart. Do you want to choose a poem to leave us with?
Sure, because this last poem that I'll read for you, which I wrote from my friend and manicurist, Lisa. I spoke to her last week. I said, Lisa, I'm going to read your poem. It's about immigrants, and it's about her. And it's my practice of improvisation, because I don't think I got everything right. I never get everything right, but it's worth a try. So, The Goddess, 6 days a week, for Lisa. Toward the end of the long subway ride from Queens to the nail salon, the subway pulls itself up a curving track, rushes out of a long black tunnel into stark Brooklyn light. That's the moment a homesick Nepali immigrant, half asleep between the lurch and screech, could mistake bright morning sun on a high train platform for a white mountain peak. Later on, if her mind drifts for an instant from chattering customers and chemical stink, she could, hefting my warm, wide foot from the soapy basin, be lifting her own baby from a bath in the kitchen sink. Still bent to her work when the sun sets, the evening customers come. She paints their toenails Himalayan crimsons. Her tiny gold bracelets tinkling like prayer bell reminders make her think of her last call home. The breezy way she's learned to croon, "It won't be long now, darling," while her little boy weeps into the phone. She doesn't know. I'm the daughter of the son left behind in Sicilian hills. How for his passage my grandmother repaid the loan shark with piecework, thousands of miniature buttonholes and lace like snow sewn onto baby clothes. At the nail salon, her boss says, "Hurry up, girls, tips in the can and use your American names." Then the door slams. On the radio, the newscaster says, "Soldiers and protesters crowd the streets of Kathmandu." The goddess has no green card. She shrugs and smiles, lifts pretty hands to heaven. "I make and send," she says. "I make and send." 100 years ago, workers blasted, burrowed into the deep, but at that one high station, because tall masted ships sail the old canals beneath, they made the track exit the earth. So now the train chugs to the top of the silver rail, and the goddess, son far away in Nepal, new daughter asleep in her womb, holds tight to her purse, blinks in the blue above the Brooklyn streets, on the arc near the splendid harbor where the glimmering city reappears.
Fabulous poem, and what a perfect way to end. Phyllis, I want to thank you so much for spending this hour with us, and an hour just so rich. There is no better way really to spend some time during your day with some poetry, and thank you also for sharing your thoughts and your stories about your work. I want to thank our audience for joining us and for their questions. Meili, thank you so much for co-hosting the event with me. Thank you also to the English Department, the Student Events and Publications Committee, and the NJCU Center for the Arts. When I think of a center, I think of a place that creates a home and opens its doors to lots of people. And you certainly have done that for me, for the students I work with, and for this larger community. So much appreciation. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Oh my goodness. Right back at you. Eddie and Phyllis and Meili are you know, I say at the end of all of these amazing events, our hearts are just open and we're just inspired to walk into our truth. So Phyllis, your work is just breathtaking. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
I would like you to keep coming back to our events. I want to thank Anna Carhart, our theater manager, Justin Tinker, our technical director, Sabrina Saballo, our box office manager, and Zoom maven. And I'd like to tell you about some upcoming events tomorrow. We have the Kamala Effect, Race, Gender, and Power, an amazing discussion that I hope you'll join us for. And then it's a doubleheader day. We're going to have a tremendous talk with visual artist Jazz Graff on the art and impossibilities of belonging. And then coming up, we're going to have a concert with the Honey Dewdrops on Saturday, April 17th. And finally, in this round of events, Baron Ryan in concert, amazing pianist, Saturday, April 24th at 8:00 p.m. So you can find out more and sign up at njcu.edu/arts. So thank you so much again. Eddie, I'm going to toss this back to you to close our it's afternoon now. So
thank you so much. These are all wonderful events, and in a few weeks we will post also the announcements for 2 other literary events with Emily Bernard and Joanna Clapp-Sermon, and we would love to hear from you if you have suggestions for events. We're such eager to hear them. Thanks again for being with us today. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.